gentlemen, good evening to each and every one of you. I can't tell you how excited I was to just look at that screen and see a piece of ornithological history actually taking place. I hope you realize that what you just saw, a camera on a little cable pushed down underground, and to see the first ever live photographs of a Markham storm petrel. I mean, this is one of my clients once said to me, is better than sex. You saw true ornithological history. And here we are trying to raise money to save storm petrels because we know so little about these birds. And already the news has been spilled. We found them. It's not that we have to find them. All we have to do is to raise money to study and to find out where the majority of these birds are actually breeding. So it's game over. As a seabirder, I can tell you that 30 years ago we knew nothing about Markham storm petrels. No nest or eggs had ever been found. And in the short talk that I'd like to give you here this evening, I just really want to compare some of the groups of seabirds so that you understand what we are talking about here. We're talking about learning. We're talking about the, if you like, the accumulation of knowledge so that we can actually save not just one species, but several groups of species, especially down in South America, where so many of our strange and enigmatic storm petrels actually live. Looking out around here this evening, I can tell you that I'm just filled with absolute, I'm shocked. I didn't realize that I knew so many Californians. And not only that, I've known some of you, as you will know, longer than I've been married to my wife, Shirley. And I've been married 23 years. So when I look out, as I look out on many audiences, not just here in California, but around the world, that it's often like looking out and seeing many familiar faces, lots and lots of friends. So welcome and thank you for the support. It really is a worthwhile project. Larry wrote to me, he invited me, and I said yes immediately. Mainly because it was seabirds, but because it was such a fantastic thing to do, to be a small part in working out the life history of one of the least studied birds in the world, and that's the Markham petrel. I've called this Making a Difference. And let me just begin by saying that the open ocean is to birds what space is to mankind. It's the last great frontier. For most birds, the open ocean poses the harshest, the most unyielding, and the most dangerous of all environments. And yet it's an environment that covers nearly 2/3 of the world's surface. It's an area that most birds avoid. But as many of you know, because many of you are well-traveled and have made journeys across numerous oceans, there are some days you can be hundreds, sometimes even thousands of miles from the nearest point of land. Go to the rails of a ship, look seawards, and you will see a bird. But these are not normal birds. These are not land birds. These are not crows or sparrows or warblers. These are seabirds. Perhaps the most highly evolved, the most specially adapted of all birds in the world. Seabirds spend their life out on the open ocean. Think of that. An ever-changing tract of vast water. They have to survive storm and tempest. And to survive over these vast tracts of the world's oceans, our seabirds have become master navigators. They've become accomplished sailors. But above all else, folks, they've become absolutely accomplished masters, consummate masters of aerodynamics. There are some 350 or so seabird species in the world. 350. We have about 10,500 ordinary birds, but 350 species of seabirds. And the largest of them all is the wandering albatross. This bird, I've seen, I will not offend anybody here, I've seen attorneys, I've seen lawyers, I've seen doctors, I've seen people from all races of life standing on the back of a ship and see one of these fly by, and a tear will roll down their cheeks. These birds, the albatrosses, they should tug at your heartstrings, fill you with a sense of awe and a sense of wonderment. There's nothing as epic as an albatross, and the wandering albatross, quite simply, is the largest of them all. Here's a bird, but not only the largest flying bird. I know that you're all Californians and you think condors are largest. Absolutely not. You Americans always think you have the biggest cars, the biggest buildings, and the biggest birds. The largest flying bird in the world, trust me, is the wandering albatross. Not only is it the largest flying bird in the world, this bird is also the longest lived of all birds. They will reach ages that will match anybody in this room. The oldest known for many years was Grandma. She was 69 years old and had 3 husbands, spurned 14 kids. I mean, she was an absolute alpha A-type female. So these birds are able to live an amazing number of years. I said they were the largest bird in the world. The bird on the left of your screen is a bird aptly named. It's a giant petrel. It has a wingspan of 6.5 to 7 feet. It weighs 11 pounds. But look at the albatross, almost twice the size. Males will weigh 25 pounds in weight, and from wingtip to wingtip, these birds are around 11.5 to 12 feet. There's nothing larger than an albatross when it is actually flying. So you're looking at one of these amazing, epic species, the wandering albatross. Size is very, very difficult to judge in a flying bird. I've often had people on the back of a ship and I'll say, wandering albatross, largest bird in the world. Wingspan 11.5 feet. Males weigh 25 pounds. Incubation 76 to 84 days. And they'll say, we understand everything, but that bird could not have been 11.5 feet. It's so hard to appreciate size when you're on the open ocean. The only way that you really appreciate really how large an albatross is simply to get hold of one. And at that point, you realize the amazing enormity, and that's the word, the enormity of an albatross. So of the 350 or so seabird species in the world, albatrosses are easily the largest. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Out of 350 seabirds, we have 21 or 22 albatross species, easily the largest. At the other end of the spectrum are the storm petrels. Folks, these are such delicate birds. They weigh only 2 to 3 ounces. These birds are the size of a sparrow. These birds are so small that they will literally fit into your hand. This is what we're talking about here. And yet these birds are able to make journeys of 10,000-15,000 miles across open oceans, survive in winds of 80 to 90 miles an hour, live for 40 or 50 years. And yet they can fit into the cup of your hand. If you had asked me 5 years ago how many storm petrels we have, I would have told you with my hand on my heart, we have 21, because it hasn't changed for 91 years. We've had 21 species of storm petrels. Storm petrels occur in 2 groups. There's the northern group and the southern group. The northern group are the hydrobatinae. We won't get technical here, but these are birds that are characterized by long angular wings and short legs and feet that do not project beyond the tail in flight. We have a southern group called the Oceanitidae. These are the water walkers. These birds do what Peter was asked to do. These birds walk on water. They have very short paddle-shaped wings. Look at the long legs and the feet that project way past the tail. As I said, they walk on water. For those of you that are bird watchers, you will know that the word petrel is a corruption of Peter. These are Peter's birds. That's where petrel actually comes from. So these birds walk on water. They are the most fragile, the smallest of all our seabirds. And from a biologist's point of view, what turns me on is that we know practically nothing about the life histories of our 20 or so storm petrel species. Not only when we compare them with seabirds, but with other bird groups, land bird groups, I would say that storm petrels are the least known of all bird families. The least known. We've had birds that have disappeared. We've had birds that have re-emerged. We have birds that have escaped detection for 400 years. There are so many things we do not know about storm petrels and their life histories. Let me put that in perspective. Most of you here are taxpayers. You don't know this, but you have spent more tax dollars studying birds than you would probably care to want to know. And believe it or not, seabirds generally are the most studied birds in the world. And the reason, think of climate change. Think of the changing oceans, the acidification of our world's oceans. These are important things that we should all be concerned about. And one of the ways to study this is to study seabirds. So when you look at seabirds, as a rule, they are the most studied birds in the world. Take penguins. You may not know this, but the Adelie penguin has had more tax dollars spent on it than any other bird in the world. We know everything that you would ever want to know, and then some, about penguins. We really do. Penguins are the most studied of all seabird groups. And it doesn't matter whether you're a German, a French, an Englishman. If you're a taxpayer, you have spent lots and lots of dollars studying the Adelies. The reason, look where they live. They live in pack ice. As you know, with climate change, we're losing pack ice. It is hard to get a real handle on what the ecosystem is doing in Antarctica. But we use the penguins as the canary in the coal mine. If the penguins are doing well, Antarctica is doing well. Well, folks, I think you read the papers as well as I do, and you know that the Antarctic ice is retreating. The Adelie penguin is what we call an obligate pack ice species. It is only found in pack ice. It never even leaves the pack ice in the winter. So along with the emperor penguin, spends the whole winter in Antarctica. We've looked at some of the populations, and I can tell you that many populations of Adelies are in what we call catastrophic retreat. They are leaving in mass numbers. Let me put that in simple perspective. For those of you that have been to the Antarctic, you might have visited Palmer Station. Near Palmer Station, there's a small island called Torgeson Island. When I first went down there in 1984, there were 8,000 to 10,000 pairs of Adelie penguins on that island. Now, there are less than 800 pairs. We've lost over 90%. They didn't die, they just relocated. They had to go back to where there was actually pack ice. So we can use penguins to actually gauge how well the Antarctic ecosystem is doing. And because we're so interested in them, we know every facet of their life histories. For instance, for those of you that are bird watchers, you will look at this and you will know immediately that the right-hand bird, as you're looking at, is the male. He's slightly smaller than the female. If you look carefully, he's got a larger bill. He's got bigger flippers. He's got bigger feet. He weighs more. Diving ability is a factor of weight and mass. So the bigger you are, the deeper you can dive. So the male can dive to 360 feet, the female only 320. You might think that 360 feet is a lot for a penguin to dive, but it's my job to tell you tonight facts and figures, and I can tell you that the deepest diving bird in the world is the emperor penguin. 2,022 feet, holding its breath for something like 20 or so minutes. And so we study penguins, we look at the differences in the diet. We can tell you that penguins form long-lasting pair bonds. We call it monogamous, but actually they start fooling around after about 5 years and change partners, but nevertheless, as a divorce attorney once said to me, he said, if you last 5 years, I call that permanent, you know? So we're working out. So here we have long-term studies of penguins. We can tell you that the oldest penguin ever to have lived is an Adelie penguin. lived for 36 years. We can look to see how they breed, and we can tell you, female and male, they lay 2 eggs. The 2 eggs are almost the same size, but the alpha egg, the first one, is about half an ounce more. That's important. It's also laid the first 2 to 3 days ahead of the second egg, and incubation starts immediately. After 36 days, the first egg hatches out. And when that first egg hatches out, if there's not enough food, it practices what we call opportunistic sibling murder. I swear I wanted to do that to my younger sister. I swear. I just never ever got around to it. So without food, only one chick will survive. If you ever come back as an Adelie penguin, be sure you're chick number 1. Because 80 to 90% of you actually survive. So here we are, working as researchers. You can see the depth of knowledge that we have with these birds. There's a guard stage of 2 to 3 weeks. One of the adults always with the youngsters, and then the youngsters are left in what we call pressures. All of these birds all together, all in. How do you recognize your own chick? The adult walks up the beach and goes, ah! And listens. And there's a chick in the seething mass of 100 chicks. They say, that was Mom. And they start running. They identify each other by voice. The average age of a penguin, the average lifespan is 82 days. Yes, silence, stunned silence, 82 days. And the reason for that is that when the chicks are about this age, almost ready to fledge, they fledge at 70 to 80 days, by the way, 7 or 8 weeks. So when they're just about to fledge, these birds, we go in and we band them. The wonderful thing about penguins is if you band a youngster as a youngster and it's just heading out to go to sea for 3 years, it returns as an adult to breed, and I kid you not, it will land on that beach and it will jump off that beach and it will land within about 100 yards of where you banded it. So they're wonderful, wonderful study models. And so if we band 1,000 chicks, we'll only get about 90 that come back. In other words, most of them die. And most of them die within that first 7 to 8 weeks of life. If you can get past 12 weeks of age as a penguin, your life expectancy jumps to around about 20 to 25 years. And in exceptional circumstances, as I've mentioned, up to about 36 years of age, which is our oldest known penguin. We feel that emperors, by the way, probably live to about 50. We've never been able to do the research on them because they live in such harsh places. To show you the extent we go to research our birds, if you ask most bird watchers or even biologists what is the most southerly penguin in the world, they will say emperor penguins. And we thought that until we started to use satellites. And we actually use satellites now to map penguin rookeries. And believe it or not the emperor penguin, but the Adelie penguin, the colony down at Cape Royds Peninsula, is now known to be the most southerly penguin colony in the world. So you can see that we use satellites, we have lots of feet on the ground, we know an amazing amount about penguins. Last year I read a paper which said to me, what more do we need to know about penguins? And let me explain that with this particular photograph. This is a photograph of one of the most wanted photographs that you would ever want in Antarctica. If you look carefully, it's a penguin. And if you're good, you'll know it's a chin strap. But if you look carefully, there are all these white lines that radiate out like the spokes of a star. In fact, this is called a guano star. And when a penguin is in the nest, when the sun rises, they don't like to look at the sun. So they turn and face away from the sun. They actually defecate about every 4 minutes. So they'll when the sun moves. Sorry. They make a guano star. Can you imagine that 2 years ago somebody did a PhD on the internal pressure, pounds per square inch, which allows a penguin to shoot one on 4.5 feet? I mean, how much more do we need to know about penguins? So penguins are incredibly well researched. We know more than we actually need to know about penguins. And when you start looking at albatrosses, the same can be said with albatrosses. Albatrosses are one of the most researched bird groups in the world. There's only about 20, 22 species. Most of them, 18 of the 21, 22 species, are threatened with extinction in our lifetime. I won't go there now, but they are in big trouble. And again, we use them like the canary in the mine. We want to know how the oceans are faring. And the oceans, like Antarctica, are faring poorly. So albatross is very, very well studied. For those of you that have been to the Galapagos, you will have no doubt seen this particular species, the waved albatross, one of only two birds that goes walkabout with its eggs. Do you know that we study these birds so much that we have researchers that put a tag on these birds, little ring, we have their numbers, and then they follow them and they measure inch by inch how far they roll their egg each day. Can you imagine anything more bizarre? That's what we seabirders do. It really turns us on. We are absolute nerds. We are unfit for any other employment in the world. We really are. And this is what we do. There are reasons why they roll their eggs. I will not go into it, but nevertheless, this is what we do as researchers. You can see that we know lots about albatrosses if that's what we're actually doing. They have incredibly long incubation periods that stretch 60, 70 days. The longest incubation period of any bird in the world is the wandering albatross, 76 to 84 days to incubate their single egg. So very, very long incubation periods. When you look also at the fact that when they feed their young, they're feeding their youngster for about 170 to 180 days. The breeding season is so long, they cannot nest once every year. There's just not enough days in the year. Raising kids, as many of us know, is stressful, so they need a sabbatical. They nest every second year. And when they nest every second year and they release their youngsters, this is a goonie, it's a young bird. This bird, without any guidance whatsoever, folks, without any guidance, will one day be abandoned by its parent up on a cliff top in an island like, say, South Georgia. It will wait for a windy day. It will look out at the sea and it will start running with its wings out like a huge glider, and it will lift off. It's one of the most amazing, one of the most emotive things that you can ever live through. Because when you see that bird lifting off a cliff, that bird is starting a journey. It's starting a journey that will take it over 2 million miles without ever returning to land. A bird that is taught not how to survive, but simply to wander. The Latin name of the wandering albatross, Diomedes. Diomede, of course, was one of the great warriors in the Battle of Troy. And its specific name, exulans, means to wander like an exile. You're looking at the most itinerant bird, or life form actually, on the face of the planet. These birds go to sea for the first 10 years of their lives. Their plumage changes into the black and white of an adult, and when they return to breed at 10, 11, or 12 years of age, they will have flown a minimum of 2 million miles. We put satellite responders or transmitters on these birds, and some of them on average use 600 miles. The record number of miles in a single day for any life form on the face of the planet belongs to a southern oil albatross. 1,262 miles in a single day. You can do the math. They live to 70 years, 365 days a year, blah, 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 blah. When these birds actually are flying around as an adult, in their lifetime, they will fly between 10 and 18 million miles. Think of the frequent flyer miles that you can get for something like that. There is no more itinerant life form on the face of the planet. To put it in perspective, what the hell does 18 million miles? That's like 9 round-trip journeys to the moon and back. That's what these birds are capable of. They are unbelievable. I mention all of this, all about the penguins, how long they live. I've mentioned about the albatrosses, what they do, to show you that with certain seabird groups, we know so much about them. We use them as litmus paper on the ecosystem in which they live. Are things going well? Are things going bad? Right at this moment, most of it is going bad. When you look at penguins and albatrosses, then we have very, very well-researched families. When you look at storm petrels, my God, I mean, the storm petrels, these are huge. Storm petrels are only this big, and just look at them on the screen. Storm petrels right at this moment are the hot buzz in birding. Even if you are a seabird, we are beginning to get results from storm petrels that are actually defying anything that we had anticipated. Birds that have been shrouded in mystery for centuries. I think personally I was born about 150 years too soon. I really wanted to be in that Victorian era where I could go out, find new species, name them after me. Or knowing that Earl is a biologist, I name a storm petrel after Earl, knowing that when he finds one, he's going to name it after me. That's what you did in Victorian times. But those days are over. We found everything that there is to, or so we thought, up until just a few years ago. On average, only about 4 or 5 new birds found a year. And seabirds, no such thing as a new seabird. Not for 55 years. No new storm petrel for 92 years. It just doesn't happen. Where can they hide? They're on the ocean. There's nothing to hide under on the ocean. Nothing at all. And so storm petrels right at this moment are just a topic of conversation. They are incredibly small. They're very delicate, or so it seems. And they often occur in large flocks, but we know nothing about them. With the penguins and the albatrosses, I told you what we knew about them. With the storm petrels, I can't do that. With the storm petrels, I can only tell you what we don't know about them. So let me begin. A little walk through the storm petrels to show you what the team that Barry is trying to raise money for actually face. The bird watchers will have already identified this. This is an Elliott's or white-vented storm petrel. It is found off the western coast of South America along the length of the Humboldt Current. It's a small bird. In fact, this is the bird that you saw in the hand just a little while ago. Same species, not same bird. So this is an Elliott's or white-vented storm petrel. They occur by the hundreds and hundreds. You come out of a port anywhere, along the coast of Peru, off the coast of Chile, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds of them. At a recent count, in an afternoon, 2 researchers counted over 1 million. Just going along, 1, 2, 3, 4, a million, you know. So you can see that these birds are not rare. They occur by the bucket load. And yet, this photograph was the first photograph of Elliott's or white-vented storm petrel taken on the shore. Up until about 5 or 6 years ago, no one had ever found the nest or egg of this bird, a bird that occurs by the millions. Even now, we've only found 5 nests, all on one little island off the coast of Peru. And it's a bird that occurs by the millions. It has a cousin up in the Galapagos Islands, Latin name Oceanites galapagos. That translates in our language to Lowe's storm petrel. How many of you have been to the Galapagos? Lots of you. You know that there's a research station that's been on the Galapagos for almost 100 years. Scientists of one sort or another are coming out, going in. They're looking at plants, they're looking at turtles, all sorts of things. We've got, at any one day in the Galapagos, 12,000 people, visitors. And after all this time, these birds that you can see by the hundreds in every port, every harbor that you go into in the Galapagos, and we've never found a single egg or a nest of this particular species. This is my next expedition in a few weeks' time, with net guns and so on. Yes, we're going to get them. But nevertheless, at the moment, we do not know, after all these years of being on the Galapagos Islands. And the same can be said for this species. This is one of the greatest seabirds in the world. It's a large bird. Some of the storm petrels are actually quite small, but this bird is the size of your American robin, which is really a thrush, but that's another story. So here we have a bird the size of an American robin, and look at the patterns. Look at the head. This is the most obvious, the most conspicuously patterned storm petrel in the world. We've been searching for its nest in the Chilean deserts for over 100 years. This is the closest we've got to it. This is one of my photographs. I can't tell you where it is because it's great secrecy, and I hope to be the one to discover all that sort of stuff. But it's a juvenile with down, and this is the closest we've got. After 100 years of searching, no idea where it nests, no idea what the eggs are like, what its biology is like. We know nothing about this particular bird. And then look at this one. This should blow you away. This is a New Zealand storm petrel. For those of you that aren't bird watchers, you'll say, so what? This bird disappeared for 157 years. In 1827, aboard a French ship, and that still hurts because I'm English, but aboard a French ship, the Astrolabe, in a small cove in New Zealand, they went out, they shot 2 of these birds. About 20 years later, a British ship, thank God, went down and got another one. We had 3 specimens, never saw them again. Extinct for over 150 years. Until in 2003, somebody's out there, and with this age of digital cameras, they took a photograph and said, what's that? And the rest of the world said, my God. This bird returned from the abyss of extinction. This is a bird that returned from the dead. We thought it was extinct. And here we have a bird, first named, as I said, in 1827, disappeared for 150 plus years, and then made a reappearance in New Zealand waters in 2003. Just last year, we caught this bird at sea, we put transponders on it, and we found the first nest. It took 11 years of painstaking work to find that first single nest. You might say to yourself, a bird that returns from extinction, could it get better? And as the advert says, yes, wait, but wait. I've got much better news for you. Folks, I want you to think about discovering a new species. This is a new species of storm petrel discovered just in the last few years. It all started actually in the year 1983, over 30 years ago, off a small Chilean seaside town, sleepy little place called Porto Montt. I was working on a ship as a bird guide. It's a great job, not much money, but wonderful lifestyle. And I'm out there, and it was a grey, dismal morning. I look in front of the ship, and there, flying around, are 3 or 4 storm petrels. Now, in those days, this was before the digital age. I had an archaic Pentax Spotmatic 2. I had a very, very modest 200mm lens. I leant over the ship, and I click, and I leant over the ship again, and click, and I got another one. Now, you might say, okay, but looking at these particular images, there are details on here, characteristics that are not known, are inconsistent with any species known to science. And I'm looking at the wing bars, I'm looking at the toes projecting beyond the feet, and also the underwing and also the white. There are only 4 storm petrels that actually occur on the coast of South America, and the ones that I had seen look nothing like it. Over the next 7 or 8 years, I would see these birds several other times again. And then they just disappeared. And I kind of forgot about them. That is until 2009, when I received 12 images. These 12 images were taken by a group of American and amateur Irish bird watchers. They were on a yacht, a boat going around South America. They had come out of Porto Montt. They had seen storm petrels which they couldn't identify. They took these photographs, and then they sent them to me and said, what are they? And I took one look, and I thought, my God, if you really look, they're exactly the same as the ones that I had been seeing some 30 years before. Folks, this was an absolutely unbelievable point in my life. I want you to know that because no seabird had been found for 55 years, or certainly no storm petrels for 92 years, we thought that there was nothing left to be discovered. And yet when you look at these birds here, these illustrations, it's the unthinkable that starts to enter into your mind. A species new to science. Something that hadn't occurred in seabirding, as I mentioned, in terms of storm petrels, for almost 100 years. The amazing thing was that the sightings of the amateur bird watchers, occurred here, exactly in the same area where I'd seen mine 30 years ago. This started an absolute flurry of research. And my God, I knew there's no greater prize in life. You know, I would rather discover a new species of bird than a lottery. I mean, what the hell can you do with money? But you get immortality if you can find a new bird species, folks. I mean, think about this. And it hadn't been done for 90 years with the storm petrel. I knew what was at stake. This would be life's greatest prize. So lots and lots of research. I had various friends, and we said, let's get to museums, let's do the research. I organized a team, 5-person team. It was a race, definitely a race. There was an Argentinian team, I know we have an Argentinian team tonight, there was a Chilean team, and there was a British team, and then there was the international team. And we were the first down there. And so, one of the great joys for me is that I work in Patagonia every year, and I was down there. I just want to show you a shot here. This is Markham storm petrel. This was the last storm petrel discovered. This was discovered in 1922. It was the last storm petrel. So if we could find a new storm petrel, I mean, it doesn't get bigger or better. It doesn't matter what I do in life, nothing will ever be as big as finding a new species. I can tell you, folks, it just doesn't happen. So, having been working down in Patagonia, I'd organized a very, very quick expedition. We flew in from various parts of the world, and it was on February the 16th, 2011, that our small team organized themselves down in the small seaport of Puerto Montt. Sleepy little place, absolutely wonderful. Took a few days to get things prepared, but then on about the 18th or 19th of February, on a small boat that was 85 years old, and they charged us $1,200 to charter. You know, research sometimes is not cheap. They knew that we needed to get out. Off we set to try to find the storm petrel. I mean, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. I want you to understand what we're trying to do here. We have a bird, a storm petrel, which is the size of a sparrow. It had been seen 7 times in 32 years. And we were heading out to try to find it again, hoping that there were still at least 1 or 2 flying around. I mean, what chance is there? We had one thing on our side, and that's the brain of the storm petrel. A storm petrel's brain is not much bigger than the size of a pea. And 37.5% of that brain is given over to the olfactory lobe. These birds are bloodhounds. They smell their way across the ocean. One of the reasons that storm petrels are so hard to study is that they only come in under the cover of darkness. They are nocturnal. Sight is not of real any use to them. If I'm trying to find Shirley, my wife, when I land in the dark, vision does nothing for me. I shuffle around on the ground until I find my burrow by smell. If they live in a cave, I find my cave, but now I've got 5 females in front of me, and not that one, not that one, and I go through the birds sniffing until I find the one that smells the right smell. So these birds have unbelievably highly developed olfactory lobes. And not only do they find their nest chambers and their partners by their olfactory lobe, they also feed by their olfactory lobe. They're able to smell food from a vast distance. So when you go out to catch storm petrels, the first thing that you need, other than net guns and so on we'll come to, is a supply of fish scraps. We took 100 pounds of fish scraps out every day with us. We had a big bowl, a big barrel of oil. We stir it all up. And then when you get out there, you throw handfuls of it out. And these birds can smell food at 10 miles. They really can. You know, eagles can see a mouse move at 7 miles. Storm petrels, much better. They can smell a cupful of oil at 10 miles range. We've done tests with them. So they have tremendous olfactory skills. And so when we were out there on this boat, heading out on that first morning, 1 hour passed, 2 hours passed, and then suddenly Chris, the New Zealander, shouted, "There!" And absolutely right in front of us on our very first morning was a storm petrel flying by. We managed to get a couple of photographs of it and just look at it. It has white wing bars, protruding feet. It was our bird. I mean, it was almost anticlimactical. We were prepared to spend 7 or 8 weeks down there. I didn't tell that to Shirley, but I was prepared to spend 7 or 8 weeks down there. Anything it took to get this particular bird. Here we are, 2 hours out of port, and the first one flies by. My God, how lucky could we get? We got into the chum bins and we emptied over a lot of chum. What actually happens always is we get lots and lots of birds coming in. And so first of all we get the albatrosses, then we get the gulls, and they eat up all the big stuff. They disappear. That's great. Okay, we've got the neighborhood back, they've all gone. And so now, the wind, and you can see the wind, we like windy days, it takes tiny little bits of oil and so on, and it blows it downwind. These birds, they smell, and I kid you not, from 10 miles, you've got to give them about 20 minutes to get to you. And so after about 20 minutes, we're waiting on the side of the boat, binoculars at the ready, cameras at the ready, just waiting. And there, the first one came flying in, bouncing across the water. Can you imagine what that was like? There were 5 researchers on the boat. There weren't 5 more excited people anywhere in the world at that particular moment. We were wetting our pants. I mean, this was we knew, we could see it was new to science. That's only the start of it, folks. There's so much you've got to do. We needed to catch them, we needed to do so much. We needed to measure them, blood and tissue samples, but at least we had found them. And so the first one came in, and I'm with my camera, and then Chris shouts. And I said, my God, he says, here's another 3 coming in. And I look around, and another 3 coming in. And then Michelle, the Chilean, he goes, my God, there's 100. And we look out, and there were hundreds of these storm petrels around us. Folks, this is a bird that was new to science. You're not supposed to find hundreds of them, only 1 or 2, that's all we need. But there were hundreds and hundreds of around them. It was the most magical moment of my life. I absolutely guarantee it. It was absolutely sensational. The weather was so rough, we couldn't get the small boat out, and so we had to go back into shore. But boy, I think we drank too much wine that night, but nevertheless, we had great, great celebrations. This was the following morning. You can see the line. This is our chum slick, our oil slick. We put the oil slick down again, and then Chris and Karen, the New Zealanders, these 2 had developed the net gun. They were in a boat the size of a bathtub. Now when you see this on the screen, the boat's not moving around. It was a calm day, but you should see this. This boat's still going up and down 4 or 5 feet at any one time. It is absolutely unbelievable. The net gun itself is a masterful affair designed by Chris Gaskin. These 4 spokes are like the spokes of a shotgun. The net is held in here, the string attaches to the corner. You have a gas chamber of compressed air here, and you sit. This is the greatest fun. This is an e-ticket ride at Disney if you ever saw it. You sit on the back of a boat, and the storm petrels come in, and the net goes off. It is amazing. It's like scoring a goal at Wembley, if you know what that is. If you're British, you'll understand. And so here you are, you sit in the back of the boat, and you attract the birds in. Our gunner, if you like, was Karen, and she was about to make ornithologic history on this day. Her first 2 attempts, she missed. And every time you miss, you have to bring the boat in, reload the net. It's a laborious process, about an hour or so. But on her 3rd attempt, out she went. And the birds came in. You can see there's 1 bird here, and there's 1 there. The net came out and over, and we got 2 birds. Not 1, but 2. I swear, the cheer that went up from that little boat, I use this phrase a lot, but my God, you could have heard us in Alaska. 2 of us, Michelle and myself, fully grown men. We hugged each other, and we were sobbing like babies. We really were, because we knew we had it. We knew there now could be no escape. We had all the material to test whether this was actually a new species. We often say in the bag. Figuratively, it was in the bag. We took it downstairs to our laboratory, the makeshift laboratory. If you're a bird watcher, you'll tell me that this is an adult bird and it is just finished breeding. That information is on that slide. If you're a birder, you will know that. Look at the primaries. These are all fresh primaries down to here. These are short grey primaries. These are warm brown primaries. I think think you all know that birds molt their primaries once every year. There are 10 functional primaries. These are the last 2 to go. Molt and breeding do not coincide, so we knew exactly that we were into the breeding season, and we had juveniles around us, which is another story. And also, look at the tail. Absolutely unknown, a tail like that. And you know, when you're trying to establish a bird as a new species, you need measurements, you need biometrics. And so you have to take wing measurements. I'll just go back. You see here, this is the carpal joint. Down to here, this bird had a wing of 139 millimeters. That won't mean anything to most of you, but to me as a seabirder, that's significant. There's no storm petrel on the west coast of South America with a wing longer than 127 millimeters. So when I measure 139, I know I've got a new species. I've got a measurably different bird. And you see, look at this. This is amazing. I took one look at the foot here. You see this central toe? This was a long central toenail. This was a toe that was going to be a tremendously long toe. Just look here, middle toe, 26, 27, 27. The longest toe of any storm petrel off South America is 19 millimeters. I know that this is the sort of stuff that I know, this is my job. But this bird on toenail alone, on the central toenail alone, was a new species of science. We did take lots and lots of blood. We took feather work, we recorded, but I can tell you that when we wrote our scientific paper, we never ever had to use feathers or DNA. This bird was so measurably different and so unbelievably different than anything that had ever been seen before. Even its feeding, its ecology, etc. I won't go too much into it. But we were down there for 7 days. We caught in the N14, we took all the samples and so on. We had our bird. That did not mean we had won the race. You've got to publish. We could have had the Argentinians coming down behind us. We could have had the Brits coming down behind us. They could have got the bird themselves. They could have written a very quick scientific paper and we would have lost the race. Publish or perish, that's what we call it. And one of the ways that you actually establish a precedence is to actually get up and make a press statement. And it sets a priority. And it just so happened that a few days after finishing this particular expedition, I was going to be in San Diego at an Audubon conference where I was a key speaker. And so, with the help of Diane, I think she's in the room somewhere, with the help of Diane, and we arranged to have a reporter from the Los Angeles Times, and the first paper to carry news of the new species of storm petrel was the Los Angeles Times, March the 5th, I think 2011. All of the English-speaking papers, major papers in London and Sydney and so on, and even Spanish papers actually picked up the story. We had established a precedent, and so the bird was ours. We had to be careful. We couldn't say what we were going to call it, because that would invalidate the name. There are all these strange, scientific things, rules that you have to go through. And believe it or not, folks, it took something like another year and a half to finish the paper, and just last year, in the prestigious journal, The Orc, this storm petrel was actually named scientifically. I mentioned that in the old days, especially in Victorian days, you could name a bird after yourself. I mean, wouldn't that be great? But then it became kind of bad form. So then, as I mentioned, I would hope that if I caught one and named it after Earl, he'd name one or catch one and name it after me, But then that became bad form as well. But you can still have fun with naming a bird. I mean, without any doubt whatsoever. Well, maybe not, because I'm working on 3 new species at the moment. But anyway, but with almost certain doubt, I probably will only ever name one bird in my life. Because it doesn't happen that often. So you can still have fun. So if you look at the name here, Oceanites pincoya, this is the pincoya storm petrel. And you might say, what is pincoya? Well, as I could name the bird, we might as well have some fun. So I named the bird after a Chilean sea goddess who apparently rises naked and pure from the ocean and is kind to passing fishermen, i.e. seabirds. That's what I named this particular storm petrel after. So as you can see, folks, you can have great fun with seabirds. I hope that this little run that we've had through here, you now know that we know so much about albatrosses, we know so much about penguins, we know virtually nothing about our friends, the storm petrels. These are the smallest of the world's seabirds and also the most enigmatic of all seabirds, and possibly the least studied family of birds in the world. So let's narrow our focus to this bird. This is the one that Larry introduced to you and showed you absolutely mind-blowing photographs of at the beginning of this short talk here tonight. This is the Markham storm petrel. Notice it's very low in weight. It's an oceanodroma. Does not have projecting feet. It was named, by the way, after a Captain Hastings Markham, who shot one, then passed it on to the museum, and then they realized it was a new species, and then they named it in his honor. These birds are thought to nest in the coastal deserts of Peru, and now, just recently, I think it's now proved, in the deserts of Chile. Sometimes 50 kilometers inland, sometimes maybe 5 or 10. But they nest in areas of particularly saltpeter works and so forth. And these are areas that are seeing great disturbance with mining companies and so forth. And folks, I cannot stress to each and every one of you, this is so critical. Timing is of the essence here. We really need to do a study. We need to establish a baseline of information so that we can protect the areas that these birds are nesting in. On current knowledge, our total for these birds would be between 10 and 30,000 individuals in the world, but we simply don't know. What we do know is that we need to work fast to be able to conserve the Markham storm petrel. Larry was kind enough to give me a call and ask whether I would want to do this, and without hesitation I did, because I truly believe this is an opportunity that we can make a difference. This is an opportunity that ordinary people, and I say ordinary, but some of you aren't, and many of you aren't, but people, everyday lives, can actually contribute even just a few dollars to be able to send a team of young men out into the deserts and to look for what is certainly one of the least known and least studied birds in the world, and that is the Markham storm petrel. Very rarely do we get a chance to make a difference. Tonight we do, and already many of you have. If you haven't purchased anything, if you haven't contributed anything, folks, this would be a great time to do it. Thank you for your support, and Larry, thank you for getting this on.